Hi,
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I mean, if I never have to talk about Prince Harry again, I'll be okay, Court.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've seen all the interviews and stuff you've been doing over the past few days, and it seems crazy.
I know it is. It really is. I never thought it would be like this.
Yeah, it was. I've about halfway through the book right now, and I can't believe some of the things I've been reading.
Yeah, I just don't know who ultimately approved some of it because
Yeah.
maybe it was made without an overall objective. Like I really thought that he'd go into this and say, so I want to create this book that will position me as a thought leader. I want to create this book that will create opportunities for me in the future in mental health, in veterans affairs, and this is just really very tabloidy from what I've read so far. I mean, I've finished it. I have fallen asleep a little bit during the audiobook, so I'll have to go back, but it's done for me. And I really just got the sense that this was sensationalism and less about a bigger, a higher goal.
It's been really interesting. Some of it I thought kind of like you were saying is it's a little too personal.
Yeah.
Some of
Oh,
it
yeah.
was some of it was definitely I was reading some of it and I was quite shocked that
Yeah, I've never thought about you below the trap, but below the belt. But thanks,
yeah.
thanks, Carrie.
I when I saw those when I started seeing all the leaks last week, I was shocked by all of it.
Well, I thought that the leaks, I was careful to not comment on most of the leaks because they were so outlandish that I thought they were
Mhm.
parody, but I was proven wrong. Most of some of the craziest leaks were in fact real portions of the book. And I'm
Yeah.
still careful if somebody sends me something, if I don't recognize it, I don't share it. Because I have seen some parodies of it, floating around. And but yes, it's just so legitimately crazy, some of the parts of that book that it could look like it's somebody just trying to have just poking fun at him, really.
Yeah. Kind of like you were saying with not like with being careful what you share and stuff. When you know there's going to be a lot of drama like that, how do you prepare for that? Like how do you prepare to like do all the commentating and stuff on that?
Well, it's evolved. I used to put together multiple talking points, and I used to try not to repeat the same thing twice. And that gets exhausting for you because you're going, oh, we're thinking, have I already said this? I shouldn't repeat this while you're live on television and your eyeballs are going crazy because you're trying to figure out what the next thing you're going to say is. But it occurred to me that not everybody that watches me at 9 a.m. are going to watch me at 10 p.m. And not everybody that watches me at 3 p.m. are going to see me at 5 p.m. So if I have a good point, stick to that and own that point. For instance, with this book coming out, and before it was the book, it was the interviews he did with ITV and
Mhm.
CBS. So I noticed fairly quickly that the ITV interview differed from the CBS interview. He says the royal family isn't racist on the ITV interview. On the CBS interview, he says that the family doesn't get along with Meghan because of stereotypes, one being that she's black and biracial. Okay, well, that is a dramatic difference from you telling ITV that the family is not racist. So I pretty much stuck to those talking points for the next few days. Here's what I want to point out. He has two different tones for two different audiences. Is he pitting us against each other? Is he trying to is he manipulating the media? Is he manipulating the audience with very specific talking points? And so I just kind of own what I feel confident in, and it's okay to repeat it a couple of times. But before, I used to always think I had to have something new for everybody, and that just gets exhausting trying to juggle that, and also just being paranoid. Oh, have I said this before? It's okay to repeat things because somebody might not have said it. Somebody might not have heard you, and uh, if it's a good point, you just need to focus on that.
Yeah, definitely. Do you when you like are filming a podcast episode, do you kind of stick to that same thing of like keeping the talking points, or with each different episode, do you try and make them different?
Well, with the podcast, it's kind of a free for all. With the podcast, Well, what I've learned that differs in the States, here in America, we're not paid for television commentary. They consider it your free publicity for you. Hopefully they mention your podcast or your book but that's not a guarantee. They can have you on 10 minutes and not say anything about
Yeah.
your website or your podcast or your book. So you're like, well, I just gave you 10 minutes of my life or more. But in the UK, they do pay. And a lot of my guests are from the UK, and I don't pay because I've really, the way I'm an American, and that's really
Yeah.
not the way things work. So, with that in mind, I'm just trying to get anybody I can, because a lot of people, like, specifically, I'll say it. I don't care. Paul Burrell is like, I won't talk to you unless you pay me. And I'd love to talk to Paul, but I
Mhm.
can't pay him. And so, Wendy Williams, I reached out to Wendy Williams, who's a huge personality here in the States. Meghan
Yeah.
Markle had attempted to work with her. She wanted $10,000 to talk to me,
That's a
so
lot.
I'm trying to get people to talk to you for free and to give you a significant amount of time. A podcast is 20 minutes to an hour typically. I really try to get who I can, figure out what they're confident in talking about, what they're comfortable talking about. Because if I get a sense that somebody doesn't want to talk about something, I'm not Barbara Walters. I'm not, who's that other one? The one that went after Britney Spears. I'm spacing on her name.
Oh,
The
yeah, I know who you're
blonde.
talking about too.
Yeah, but I'm not like that. I want you to
Mhm.
enjoy our conversation. I want you to come back and talk to me again. So I'm gonna stay in my lane, and I'm just gonna ask you what you're comfortable talking about. So I get a sense of what they want to talk about, where their strength is, and that's what I focus my energy on. But you do hear a lot of the same stories twice, and that's
Mhm.
because I think within the royal family, wow, it's so bizarre, the cycles that you see, that continue to happen. So yes, I might bring up Sophie and Edward trying to do the half in, half out a couple of times, because I'm dealing right now with Harry and Meghan that wanted to do the half in and half out. So yes,
Yeah.
Sophie and Edward are going to come up a couple of times, because we're using that as an example for what's happening right now with Harry and Meghan. Um, but yeah, I think when it comes to the podcast, I just want to cater to the guests' strengths and needs, because I'm so grateful that they're actually giving me their time.
Yeah. Kinda touching on, like, the guest of your podcast, who was your favorite, person that you've had brought on the podcast so far?
Well, oh my gosh, Courtney, don't do this to me. You well,
They've all been so great.
I know, and I really love them. I think the biggest get for me was Andrew Morton, because I mean, he has such a
Yeah.
strong connection to Diana's history, to Diana's story and her legacy. So obviously, access to Andrew Morton is great. I've met him a couple of times now,
Oh, cool.
and one time he went to do like the European kiss to me, and I didn't know, and we almost kissed on the mouth. So that's my Andrew Morton story. I remember calling everybody afterwards going, oh my gosh, I just made such a joke of myself. I accidentally almost made mouth contact with Andrew Morton. This is like right after COVID too, so
Oh
you
my
don't want
god.
to get that close to anybody.
Yeah.
So Andrew Morton is definitely one of my favorites. He's become a mentor of mine. Christopher Anderson, I've been reading his book since I was a little girl. Like the day Diana died, I read when I was a child, like almost a child, like a
Mhm.
preteen. And he's written about JFK Jr. and all these people that I like. So to sit and talk to him is really exciting. Perez Hilton is fun to talk to, because I grew up
Yeah.
reading his books. I think he probably thrust me in the direction that I'm in. Um, I don't know. Gareth Russell's another one who's great, because he's like a young royal commentator. So he'll make
Yeah.
he'll make Bravo references that are so hilarious and accurate. So I guess I would say all of them, Courtney. I don't know. There's just so many good ones. Giles Brandwith was an amazing get. He created the I'm a Luxury sweaters that Diana wore.
Yeah.
And he's actually friends with the royal family. So how
Oh,
incredible to
wow,
actually
yeah.
access to somebody that really knows them. So I did not give you an answer. I basically just listed off everyone that's ever been on my podcast. I will tell you, coming up, I have Spencer Pratt,
Oh, cool, yeah.
who I mean, I grew up watching him on the hills, but it turns out he actually knew Meghan Markle before she married Harry, while she was married to Trevor. So I'm gonna get a little bit of a scoop from him on what
Yeah.
that was like.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting listen.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what's, like, your favorite part about, like, doing your podcast, and what inspired you to wanna do a podcast?
Wait, what was the last part of the question?
What inspired you to wanna do the podcast?
What inspired me to want to do the podcast is I just like to talk about the history of the royal family. I am kind of anxious about the current gossip when it comes to what's currently happening. I'm not necessarily, that's not what I thrive on. That
Mhm.
actually makes me, it gives me anxiety because it's all whisper, it's all guessing, it's all rumor, it's all secret sources. And
Yeah.
so I'm not confident in those discussions. But what I do love is being able to study Diana for the last 25 years, being able to read and source exactly where I got that information from, a specific
Mhm.
book, a specific human. I am confident and comfortable in having conversations that are historically based. It's the
Yeah.
current gossip that I'm just kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to repeat this. Should I say this? Oh, I don't know if I trust this. But the history of the family is what I really like to discuss. And the reason that I started the podcast was because I wanted to learn more than I'd already consumed through the books, through the documentaries, through everything I'd studied. I thought, I wonder if there's anything else out there. And I have had those conversations where I've discovered new things, and that's been really exciting.
What's been, like, one of your favorite topics of conversation through the podcast?
Hmm. I don't know. I really like the older history, but obviously I'm going to say 80s and 90s Diana and Charles.
Yeah.
And that's actually pretty difficult to, that's a conversation that's hard to have right now because Harry has made these, like, drawn this line to where you're either pro Charles or you're anti Charles.
Yeah.
And you know, the truth is not always shiny, it's not always happy, and it's not always positive, but I think everybody made mistakes in the past, but to me, that past is really interesting. And I can like Charles today, but dislike what happened in the 90s. But I can like him today and just think, oh, that's awful that that happened in the 90s. And wow, what a story. And but it's hard to be that way now because everybody wants you to be pro or against. And no, I can say I wish Charles would have married Camilla from the get-go, and I can say I still, you know, I celebrate his reign. That you could say both things, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought the same thing because there's always since Diana's death, there's been the huge debate of you're either pro Charles or anti Charles, and I think like kind of like you were saying, the past is it's the past, and they obviously moved on, so it's just everyone else has to get into the future and move on. I think too.
Right. And
Um,
what happened to Diana was devastating, but they were consequences of her own choices. You know, I love Diana. I built an entire brand on Diana, but Diana
yeah,
was trying to make Dr. Khan jealous by running around with Dodie, a well-known drug user who was engaged to another woman. Like, you just have to make better decisions. Had Diana not been trying to make Dr. Khan jealous, had she not been running around with Dodie, we wouldn't be dealing with those consequences. And I think Harry is one of those consequences, that his destructive path that he's chosen. But that's the reality.
you talked about making like a brand based on Diana, and I know like your website and your podcast are to die for daily. So like, what does that phrase mean to you, and like what significance does it hold?
Yeah, I mean, to die for daily to me is to live every day with your heart on display, like Princess Diana. Like I said, she's made mistakes in the past, but ultimately, the reason that the world fell in love with her was because of her sincerity. She felt a lack of love. She spent her entire life looking for love, looking for somebody to fill this void in her heart. And as she navigated her love life and couldn't find that, you saw her quietly going into hospitals, holding the hands of people that were dying. You know, that we rarely heard about these things, but
Yeah,
she dealt with the hole in her heart by um, really truly loving people that were in need and were in need of similar things to her. You know, wow, I'm sitting here alone in a hospital dying, and all I want is affection. In walks Princess Diana to
yeah,
to to them, to talk them through their pain and to talk them through their suffering. And you know, I know that there are certain former members of the royal family that say that they are similar, but you just saw a sincerity in Diana that was undeniable. And so that's what To Die For daily is. It's living every day with your heart on display, with compassion in action, and being a good human.
When would you say that like your interest in Diana and the royal family began?
When I was a little girl, my mom always had the tabloid magazines that you could
Mhm.
find, on at the supermarket checkout, that you're just like, alien gives birth. And you're like, no, I mean, those were in my house. But in those magazines, there were always pictures of Princess Diana. There was always a story about Diana's marriage. And I grew up just being fiercely, defending this woman I'd never met before, would never see in person before, but I was so protective of her because I felt like she was getting the short end of the stick. And as I grew up and had a real interest in the royal family, I I really actually my whole brand almost was evolved around Meghan Markle. But once Megxit happened, I pulled back on that entire layout. It was called In Defense of Meghan Markle. Then Megxit started to happen, and I was like, I don't know if I can defend her anymore. And so I deleted all of that stuff, started fresh, because I thought, who do I love that everyone else can rally around? And that was Diana. And under the Diana umbrella, you can continue to talk about Meghan and Harry, and you
Mhm.
can continue to talk about William and Catherine. And personally, I would like to slow down on the Harry and Meghan conversation. And I'd like for my focus to be more about the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Yeah, kind of touching on like William and Catherine. I saw that recently you were in Boston for their visit here. I
Did
actually was
you?
there
Yes, you
too.
were there too.
Yeah, it was such a cool experience. What would you say was your favorite part about that trip?
I'd say my favorite part about Boston is whenever I'm working royal events in the UK, we're on a platform. We're up above everybody. It's us and a million other people, other media people. And in Boston, it was nice to actually be in a group of royal watchers, meet fellow royal watchers, meet other Americans that
Mhm.
were excited about the Prince and Princess of Wales. So I think it was the difference in being up and feeling kind of isolated with media in the UK, but in America, actually being among the fans, being among the other royal watchers, and really how much we could access William and Catherine. They were right there. They were walking over, touching us, talking to us.
Yeah.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, well, where did you come from? The fact that they were just so accessible was pretty incredible for an American that hadn't seen them in, what was it, 10 years? I mean, it was at least, yeah, it's been
Yeah,
a
it was a
while.
while. Did you get to meet them when they were here?
Yeah, just Catherine.
That's really cool.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
was
want William to, I didn't want to make things weird between William and Catherine with, this. Just kidding.
Yeah, we were hoping to be able to meet them, but we were at their like city hall engagement that first day when it was like super rainy and cold, and
But
so
but
that
how
was
great was the energy? How great. I've heard that the energy was
yeah.
insane.
Yeah, it was wild, and once about we got there early because if we had never done something like this, so we didn't know like what time to get there, so we were there like all day, and we could like see like they were like changing all the setting of everything, and it was super cool. And one of my favorite parts about the day was I got to meet Cameron Walker, and
Love him.
I'm like a huge fan of him, so it was like a super cool moment of the day for me.
He's so sweet. He's such a good man. Yeah, no, I love him
Yeah.
too. I think what was troublesome for me while I was there was that you had international media saying that the visit wasn't great, that the visit, and I will say, obviously, the Lady Susan Hussey scandal, those headlines certainly sold a show. But if you
Hmm.
were physically in Boston, there were a significant amount of people that were there to see William and Catherine. They were incredibly excited to see William
Yeah.
and Catherine. And, specifically when I was at Harvard with Catherine, they they had to pull her out of the building. I mean, she wanted to talk to everybody. She was taking
Yeah.
pictures with dogs. If there was a baby within the vicinity, it's like she's a magnet to babies. And so that was what bothered me so much about that trip is it was really a positive experience for them.
Hmm.
It was a positive experience for all of the people that travel from all over the country to see them. And, Catherine, while they say that if it was such a negative experience, Catherine would have been in and out, jumping back in the car as soon as the event was over. She was taking pictures with everyone. She wanted to touch everyone's hand. She wanted to collect the gifts that people had brought her. She was just so um, loving. She was so kind. And it was clearly important to her that she physically had some sort of encounter with as many people as she could while she was there. That's not somebody that's feeling like this trip is a negative experience. That's somebody that's confident in herself and confident in the entire ordeal.
Yeah. And I know you did like you got to do like a lot of on the ground reporting for that. So like kind of like going with like everything else, like for like all the other commentary you do. What's something that you get to like or you hope to be able to do commentary on in the future?
I mean, if I only ever talked about the royal family again, I'd be happy. I think my ultimate objective with what I do is to move to London and to be a part of the royal rota that Harry just dismisses in Spare. I think ultimately that is my goal to be there and to be a part of that tight knit team that gets to travel the world with them. And that might not be an option for me because I've done so much commentary and because it's been so opinionated. Somebody might be like, we'd rather somebody that just sticks to what the facts are. And that if that doesn't happen for me, that's just not my path. But in branding myself and in doing all of this, the ultimate goal is to work in London and to be able to follow the royal family on a regular basis.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I've had ideas of doing that because I'm going to college actually this fall, so I'm like starting to look at like ideas and I'm doing communications. So like looking at something like doing reporting like that is one of my ideas that I'm looking at. But to like get where you are in your career now, where did you start?
Well, I mean, I think if you look back way far, I mean, I had an NSYNC fan site, and I learned so much about building a community, and that's when I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I learned so much about building a community, graphic design, HTML. Which I still use. I still use graphic design every day. And I literally started with this NSYNC website. HTML I use regularly for todiefordaily.com, and just building that community. What am I interested in? What questions do I want to ask? Because if I'm asking those questions to myself while I'm sitting down watching something, then my audience is probably curious about that too. I'm going to make a note to ask that on my podcast next time when I have an expert on. So I'd say that my career probably that's put me here started when I was 12 or 13
Yeah.
building that website. But I was in local newsrooms for 5 years. I was a live streamer for Fox News, so I would stream whatever events were happening, whether it was a presidential debate or whether it was a car chase. I would do the commentary over it and pull other people from the newsroom and to sit down next to me, and we talk about what was going on. Um, I worked in marketing and PR, which has been very helpful because I can say, here's why I think that they're doing this from a PR standpoint. I think
Mhm.
it's really positive that they're doing this, or this is really detrimental. And I worked in PR for over 10 years. And the firm I worked with several one presidential candidate. And then they worked with several politicians. In fact, they were known for a while for being like the go-to agency if you wanted to run in the city of Phoenix.
Oh,
They
cool.
we so I had those backgrounds, and I think I wrote for a magazine called AZ Weekly for a little while, and I worked for a magazine called the Phoenix New Times for a while. So I have a lot of media and PR experience, and I just decided to use that experience to build this Royals brand.
Yeah. You talked about the graphic design. How else would you say that creativity has like helped you as a royal commentator?
I think it has helped me immensely as a royal commentator because I Well, first of all, the drawings that I've done of the royal family that have become, kind of so significant for their brand,
Mhm.
that is just a girl that can't afford, the copyright images on her website. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start sketching these out, see if this works. And that's been really beneficial to me because so many people will contact me and say, oh, I love that part of your website. Oh, I love that you do these drawings. That's so unique. And it's like, well, I can't afford the other stuff. So thank you for saying that. That's really nice. Um, so I think creativity has been such a strength. And I don't know. I think it's also just not going the stuffy route with I'm not trying to be Bridgerton in my branding. I'm kind of trying to be TRL, which was an old MTV show that you're probably too young to remember. But I think that that's been beneficial to me to just try to be different and not try to be like everyone else. Because if I was just floral and quaint and cute, I'd be competing with a lot more people. But because I'm just kind of like, hey, I'm wild, I'm bright colors, I'm cartoons, and uh, I'm loud. I think that's been a beneficial.
Yeah, I know with, like, you said that you talked about the drawings that you do. I know you did a lot of those for, the R's for Adventure book, which I have to say I just got, a couple weeks ago, and
Thank you.
I'm a huge fan of it. It's super cool, it's super creative. What made you wanna write that book?
What made me want to write that book? Well, I wanted to contribute to the Diana conversation. Look, I love Charles and Camilla today, but I also felt like the closer we got to the 25th anniversary of her death, the more we were hearing stories and they were like out of nowhere. The Diana cheated first, which I hate that
Yeah,
argument. I hate that argument. I'm sorry. And so I just kind of wanted to be a part of the Diana conversation. I'm not setting the record straight or anything. I mean, you have the book right there in front of you. It's just cute and happy and
yeah,
fun. But I want, I do think that um I don't think that we should try to, and we see this a little with Harry right now, change the past, change history. I mean, I'm not here to argue with anybody, but Diana says herself that on her honeymoon, her husband's calendar dropped and there were pictures of Camilla in it. I'm feeling emotionally cheated on right there. So
yeah,
I just wanted to honestly, I just wanted a way to celebrate her. I wanted to make this book to be like, we still love you, because I felt like as we got closer to the 25th anniversary of her death, I felt like there was a negative narrative that was coming out a little bit. And CNN did it. CNN had this guy on saying she cheated first, and
mhm,
and to me, I was just sitting back going like, I just want to create something that says we still love you. Does that make sense?
yeah, 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. What do you love most about your job?
I mean, meeting people like you. I mean, I love meeting other royal watchers. I love meeting people that like the royal family as much as I do. I mean, to love the royal family, it's a it's like we're like a weird little clique that I just love so much. It's because it's not like being a pop culture fan. It's not like
Mhm,
loving a TV show because actively work to find we actively work with each other to go deeper. I found this contradiction here. I found, oh, I
mhm,
remember back in the day when this happened, and this is exactly like what's happening now. We all work together and to discover new information, to solidify information. We're very encouraging towards each other. So I think that cultivating this community has been one of the strengths. But I also really, really love reading about things that happened 30 years ago. I mean, truthfully, that's my favorite part of the job. It's just having all of that knowledge and then
mhm.
having something to do with it, because that if I didn't do this, I'd still be reading all of that information. I'd still be reading these books. That information would still be in my head. It's actually having something to do with it that's been such a blessing.
Yeah. What do you think is the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job is the negative feedback that you get. This has become, like I've said before, uh, us versus them. good versus evil.
Yeah.
And so, I saw a comment yesterday under a GB News interview I did, where in the clip and in the interview, I simply state what's in Harry's book, a
Mhm.
conversation between Catherine and Meghan. And I say in the GB News interview, how unfair to do this to Catherine when you yourself are suing, or when you yourself sued a newspaper for a letter from Thomas Markle. How is that any different? Thomas Markle providing a letter that was sent to him versus you going text by text a conversation between Catherine and Meghan. You're neither one of those people, and you're publishing that in your book. And I said, I too would be I too would be inconvenienced if my child didn't have an outfit 4 days before a wedding that the entire world is going to be watching. So that's literally what I said. There's nothing that's not factual in there.
Mhm.
All I said was I would be inconvenienced if my kid didn't have a dress. This
Yeah.
person commented underneath it, Kinsey Schofield is lying. Catherine wore a white dress to the wedding to upstage Meghan. What am I lying about? I'm repeating what's in Harry's book. And Catherine wore a yellow dress to Meghan's wedding. So if we're going to
Yeah.
talk about who's lying, that would be you. You are lying. So it's having to wrap your head around that, having to decide when you respond and when to simply ignore. But you're calling me out. This is my job. You're calling me a liar. You are challenging my reputation. That's upsetting to me. Obviously I feel like I should reply, but you have 16 followers. Is it worth the stress? Do you know what I mean? So I'd say
Yeah.
that's my favorite part of the job is dodging the negative feedback when all I'm trying to do is be objective and to tell the truth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I have a much smaller social media following than you do, but even sometimes like with like just sharing like a one sentence opinion for me, I'll get like a comment section full of just hate, and it's just kind of sometimes it gets a lot.
Yeah, it does. It weighs on you, and
Yeah.
you ask yourself, is this worth pursuing when sometimes I'm literally, I mean, I'm sure you know this bot sentinel person that went after
Yeah.
me. I mean, he called me a stalker. He called me horrible things, and 12,000 people are liking it. And I just have to sit there and go, do I engage or do I just sit back and ignore? Because at the end of the day, this is
Mhm.
only Twitter, and why do I care?
Yeah. It's kind of just like setting it aside, knowing it's not real life. It's one of
Yeah,
those kind of
and you
scenarios.
kind of have to do that. But also I would give the same advice to Harry and Meghan. Just ignore the 11 accounts that are harassing you on Twitter.
Yeah.
There's like not a lot, or whatever, the 70 accounts or whatever it is.
Yeah. In your job, where would you say you use teamwork the most?
Teamwork? I'd say when it comes to sourcing and when it comes to confirming what I'm hearing, and sometimes it's even live on TV. Like I just said on Talk TV to Emily Andrews, who I adore. I said, hey, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing that Harry can't contact William or Charles through the courtiers anymore. He has to talk to legal. And Emily said, hey, I would be careful repeating that because I actually haven't heard that yet. I do think he can still call William. Of course, Charles doesn't have a cell phone, so he has to call through a landline. Charles is not going to pick up a landline. So there is an in-between with Charles, but I can't say for certain whether or not Harry can pick up the phone and get through to William. So sometimes you're doing it live on television. You have somebody
Yeah.
going, I wouldn't repeat that just yet. So, which was my bad. I probably shouldn't have said it, but I have seen it. I've had several people say it to me, and I have seen it repeated multiple times. But I'd say teamwork is this where I see teamwork is mostly sourcing. And obviously I'm so grateful for anybody that appears on my podcast and helps me out in that way. And when you have good chemistry with somebody and you create really good, valuable content, um, you attract a really good audience. And that
Mhm.
that I'm obviously grateful for that.
Yeah. And then the last question that I have for you is, what has been your favorite thing to report on as a royal commentator, and what's something you hope to report on in the future?
Well, obviously I hope to report on the King William reign.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for a King William. But
Yeah.
wow, I'd say the Jubilee was my favorite thing to report on, because it was so, I cried just kind of envious, if I'm being honest, over the way that the city came together to celebrate this. Icon is such an overused word, but
Mhm.
she is, sorry, I'm so sorry. She is this
Okay.
symbol. Queen Elizabeth is this symbol that the entire country can get around. And I feel like sometimes our country's so polarized with politics and all,
Yeah.
these whatever. And so it's just so nice that their entire country can get around this one individual, celebrate her life of service. Obviously, the funeral was similar, but it was really kind of, upsetting and sad. And,
Yeah.
it was not the same. Jubilee was like a party, popping champagne, everybody excited about the Queen, live music, Louis going crazy.
Oh my God,
I mean,
yeah.
talk about an icon. We love you, Louis. So Jubilee
100%.
was just a totally different environment, and I preferred Jubilee over the funeral, although the theme was the same. Wow, we have this, the country has this one symbol that we all love, we can all rally around. We respect her for her service. We respect our elders, which I think is something we lack here in the United States. And it was just so, wow, inspiring to see everybody come together and love each other
Yeah.
around this woman. So that would be my answer, and I can't wait to cover a King William.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be a really good time when it eventually comes in however many years. So
uh
that
oh,
that's
I was going to say, what do you want to cover? If you were in my shoes, what would be what you wanted to cover?
I have, like I've had, like, a dream. I started, like, the royal family at 13 years old, so I've had a dream since then. That was, when I was 13 was the year Louis was born. So
Uh-huh.
I've had a dream of, like, reporting on, just George, Charlotte, and Louis when they're older. Like, if I ever do become, like, in your role, that's something I really wanna report on.
Oh, how fun. They're going to be such sweet boys. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that, I mean, just like look at Hollywood. We're going to be reporting on two very different sets of cousins, with
Mhm.
Archie and Lily versus the Wales babies. I
Yeah.
think that because they're going to grow up in LA about around a bunch of other celebrity kids, it's going to be wildly different and it's going to be very
Yeah.
interesting, those teen years.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think with that, do you think we'll see, like do you think, like, do you think, like, either set of them is gonna be, like, more, like, wild as Harry was when he was younger? Or, like, do you think, like,
Yes.
they're gonna just kinda
Yes.
be
Yes, and you know exactly which one.
yeah. Yeah.
You know exactly which
Yeah.
one. I mean, Hollywood, think about, Paris Hilton's younger brother, how he went through a phase where it was just like every weekend you'd open up TMZ and there'd be another
Mhm.
crazy story about him, in a Porsche or something going 80 miles on a highway. I think that we're going to see some of that from Montecito for sure during the teen years, because I you I do think that if Harry thinks that he is not going to receive the same treatment from his children that he gave his father and his grandparents, he's got another thing coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as it's gonna be really interesting to see how they are in, like, the formidable years as they keep growing up, and I think especially for, like, the Wales children with Kate's early years work, I think it's gonna be a lot forming for how they are when they grow up.
Well, here's some advice I would give you. I know you're going to school, and
Mhm.
I know that you're trying to figure out what the future holds for you. But if this is something you're really passionate about, I would, you could start a Tumblr. Tumblr is free. You could start a blog on a microblogging site so that you don't feel overwhelmed by the commitment,
Yeah.
and just just start doing it. I mean, that's what I did. I just started doing it. I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. It was like in the middle of the pandemic or before the pandemic that it really all started, coming together, especially since I had to switch my brand. But
Mhm.
I just, all of a sudden, it existed, and I was like, oh, by the way, this I built this. So that's what I would tell you to do. And then that way, when somebody, you apply for a job and they say, what is your experience here? You can say, well, I have this blog on Tumblr. It has 14,000 followers and I've been doing this for 2 years. I mean, that's a no-brainer. because I
Yeah.
think with royal reporting, so many people are coming from somewhere else. Okay, well, I used to do politics, but
Um,
I'm going to do I'm going to do royals now. You
I
could
have to
say I've been
interrupt for I have to interrupt for 1 second. I'm sorry.
was just saying, any advice I would have is to start now. You can start cheap. Tumblr is actually seeing an increase in activity lately.
Mhm.
But you can, just for when you apply for that job, everybody wants to see everybody wants to see some sort of example, and of course you can write a couple of articles for them, but to say I've established an audience of 14,000, I have a regular tumble
Yeah.
blog that I've been working on for 2 years, and that's actually years ago how I started all of my stuff. I started out on a free network so that I could understand what I was doing, and then used everything I learned throughout that process to actually start investing in myself and investing in my brand and building
Yeah.
it on a platform that I could monetize.
Okay. Yeah. Like, how did you get started with it? Like, how did you format it when you started and everything?
Well, I really do love Tumblr. And I think I love Tumblr because you have the ability to actually share a full blog post versus
Mhm.
um, just crossing your fingers and hoping that somebody shares a link to your website. These are all people that have
Yeah.
cultivated an audience of their own, and now they're sharing your blog post, and it's in full. So you're really getting that out there. And when I stopped doing that, it actually kind of bit me in the butt because I saw how many people were just repurposing my articles on Tumblr and getting those shares and getting those followers.
Mhm.
But that is, studying graphic design, studying the law, knowing what you're able to share legally if you want to monetize your brand,
Mhm.
knowing how long a soundbite can be, knowing what kind of commentary you have to do around that soundbite technically for it to not be copyright infringement. There are a lot of rules to know when you start out, and you know there's not really like a dummies book how to build your own brand online. You have to physically go to each and every section of what you're going to pursue. Podcast wise, what laws do I have to know? Website wise, what laws do I have to know? And everything is different, even on social media.
Yeah. And then what would you say is like the hardest difference between like the blog, the website, and like the stuff that you have now? What's the hardest difference between doing it from Tumblr and that? Obviously, besides like the copyright and everything that you have to like the laws you have to learn.
Yeah, what's the hardest thing? Well, I think formatting, like if there are still portions of my website that I absolutely hate and that I've had to use graphic design to work around because I can't.
Mhm.
I purchased a template and I've customized my template to the extent that I can, but you can't fully customize some of these templates. And so I've had to use a workaround, which is graphic design, so that my website visually looks like the way I want it to look, but that's not HTML formatting. That's actually just one giant picture that I've had to create to look the way I
Mhm.
want it to look because I can't figure out the formatting. So there are issues like that come out, and thankfully I'll be comfortable enough with Photoshop to sit there and put an image together the image that I see in my head that I just can't get the coding to work. That's been a real big challenge. Um, and otherwise, it's like with Tumblr, yeah, you can share as many pictures of William and Catherine as you want, and nobody's going to
Mhm.
slap you on the hand. But if you share a picture on your website of Princess Diana, a foreign photo agency that you don't own, a foreign photo agency will write you and demand $500 and say if you don't pay it, they'll sue you in small claims court. So, you've got to be really, really careful.
Yeah. And then for to kind of wrap it up now, what's your favorite part about your website?
My favorite part about my website is I don't know, it's just kind of like a place that I feel like houses everything, the evolution of my thoughts and my opinions. So if somebody does clap back at me and say, Wow, I thought you were, I can't believe you talk this way about Harry and Meghan. I actually have receipts where I can say, well, here's an entire year where I said that I thought Harry was going to create a book that was self-help based. Here's the entire year I
Mhm.
gave him the benefit of the doubt. Here are my receipts. So I do like the idea of controlling that, because that's one of the things about cancel culture. People on the internet are like, well, last time you said this, I did say that. Here is where I said it in full. Here are my full thoughts. Also, sometimes you're misquoted in the media. And having your own website, I can go and do the screenshots. Here's exactly what I said in that email to them, and here's how
Yeah.
it was manipulated. And I've done that sometimes too. I said, for instance, I told, what it was at the Mirror a couple of years ago, that the only way I thought Harry might return to the royal family is if he were to divorce Meghan. And I said, and I really don't see that happening. Well, the Mirror writes like, Harry can only return to family when he divorces Meghan. And then all of the, the SS came after me. And I was like, well, here's the actual quote. I said, I never thought it would happen. And even my opinion has changed now from that. I would tell you today,
Mhm.
do I think a divorce could happen? Kind of, but at least I have documented the way that I feel and why I felt that way at the time. And so if somebody does try to question my motives or try to question my thought process, I can say the evolution of my feelings is documented. It's all right here. You could just look at the calendar date and see that I'm team Harry and Meghan. I'm so upset about what's going on. Okay, now I have some questions. Are people really concerned about the way Meghan treated staff? Is this really an appropriate time for Harry and Meghan to play victim in the middle of a global pandemic? Like, you see
Yeah.
the evolution of my thoughts and how I might hear a new piece of information that changes my heart. And that's really been, I think, a big pro to having a website, because otherwise you're relying on another media outlet uploading your interview in full, which they don't always do. Sometimes they chop them up and
Mhm.
it destroys what you were trying to say. And if
Yeah.
you can almost protect yourself that way.
Yeah, yeah, that seems really important to, like, always have a stand for yourself and to know what you said is the truth, like, kinda like with Harry's book, like, they're trying to, like, have all the evidence they can and, like, support everything that they've said in the past, like, with all the
Right.
interviews and stuff he's done.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's inconsistent. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I thought when I was watching, what was it, the Tom Bradby interview on ITV, like when they said that they weren't calling the royal family racist, but then like there's like the video of Gayle King from the next morning saying that like
I have
they
receipts. I
had all
have
the
receipts. Yeah.
yeah yeah
Yeah,
I
they
thought that was
remember, yeah, the next morning they just wanted to correct that it wasn't the Queen or Prince Philip that were racist, but other people
mhm,
might be racist. It was like, what?
yeah, and they said I know kind of not kind of off topic a little bit, but they talked about in the Oprah interview how they said that it was more damaging for the person to say the name. Do you think it's more damaging if they say the name or if they don't say the name?
Wow. I mean, ultimately, it depends on who you're talking about.
Mhm.
Who said it? Who said it? Is it more damaging if they say their name? I mean, I feel like if they say their name, we need to know exactly what was said. We need to know the
Yeah.
circumstances it was said. Because honestly, it's what it sounds like. And what I've heard Christopher Anderson tell me is that it was a game of telephone. Somebody said something to Harry. He laughed at the time, turned around, repeated it to
Mhm.
Meghan, and Meghan said, oh, no, that's offensive. So, what was the intent? What was the actual conversation? What were the circumstances? What was the intention of the conversation? And we might sit back and go, I really don't think I don't think that was, I don't think that they meant what you think they meant. um and that's not dismissing any sort of racism whatsoever, but they made a really big claim and now they're walking it back. So if it was true, I feel like they would be confident in their statement and they would not be walking it back. um I think it's harmful more for the royal family brand in general, for the mystery to be over their head, to have that question
Mhm.
mark over William, Catherine, Charles, and Camilla. And don't forget, Lady Colin Campbell originally reported that it was Anne, the Princess Royal. So I think it's
Yeah.
more damaging for the royal family brand as a whole to have that mystery over it. And for Harry to walk it back, what's craziest to me is that his following refuses to hear that he walked it back. His following is still tweeting us
Yeah.
that they're racist, despite the fact that he told us they are not. So that's the craziest part of it all. It was very irresponsible for Harry and Meghan to make that statement, to make it so vaguely. It was very
Yeah.
irresponsible. And if they really wanted accountability from that person, it should have been done privately. But if you really want accountability from somebody, you've got to you got to tell them, that they did something wrong, and we don't know who it was. It's a big mystery to us.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things, like you were kind of saying, like the context always matters, and I think that's one thing, like I've noticed a lot, like in the couple years I've been following the royal family, is it's always so hard to get full context because that side, the side of like the firm, the institution, the family, they're never gonna like fully say everything. So I feel like that would probably make your job a little bit harder, like knowing exactly like what to say with like information and everything.
Yeah, and this idea that the royal family, their relationship with the press is nefarious, or their relationship with the press is strange. Courtney, it's like if I do a movie for Paramount Pictures and I've signed a contract that says I have to do a press day, I have to do a junket, and that in that contract, yes, I get to star in this movie, but I have to tell. But because I get to star in this movie and I'm going to cash this big check, I've committed to the production company that I'm going to do 12 hours of press to promote this movie.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. It's the same way that I don't know if you remember the meme, but I'm just here so I don't get fined. Remember that football player that said that during the Super Bowl? You know,
Yeah.
these athletes have to do press, they have to do press conferences, or they're fined by the NBA, or they're fined by the NFL. It's just it's a normal working relationship. Yes, we're going to give you some information you want, as long as you continue to champion these really good causes that we want to promote. We want you to show
Hmm.
up and talk about us opening this hospital for mental health. So yeah, we might okay a story or two. And then the idea of switching stories, one negative story for another, also done every day in Hollywood and Washington, D.C. These are not wild conspiracies. These are not wild strategies. This is a typical Tuesday in the world of entertainment, in the world of politics, in the world of the royal family.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that you made a lot of really good points there. I think it definitely like hearing all of that from your standpoint, I think opens my eyes to how it all works and like connects. And I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't.
Um,
They're trying to make it sound a lot more devious than it is. It just it happens every day.
yeah, and I've been talking to like with like the book and all the interviews and everything. I've been talking to my mom about it this week, and we've just been saying how like it's like you were saying, like it's every situation this happens, like it's always like it's not only like the royal family where there's like information given, or like Harry and Meghan always say, like the leaking and the planting and the sharing of all the private information. Like it's not only in the royal family. Like I've seen a lot of Kardashian comparisons especially this week and the past couple weeks with the book.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And another Kardashian comparison is, we know that a lot of the pictures that have come out of Harry and Meghan over the last 2 years were arranged by paparazzi that had permission to be there. And that is another
Mhm.
Kardashian, go-to. They'll call up their favorite photo agencies and say, we're going to walk out of the grocery store right now, and thankfully we've got a full face of makeup on and a push-up bra. Make sure you get my good side. That's just a typical Tuesday as well.
Yeah, I think especially since they've moved out to like California and the Montecito area. I've noticed there's been a lot more coverage of Harry and Meghan getting like the private photos taken and everything, and then you have like they always compare it to how like Harry says in his book, there's always all sorts of like media attention surrounding every move you make. But I feel like they're really like, especially with like William and Catherine, there's not a lot. I feel like they talk about doing all these private vacations and going a lot of places with their kids, and a lot of times you don't hear about it unless they say it.
Right. And we know specifically there's the story that Harry talks about where Meghan's in a car driving, being chased by paparazzi. We have been racking our brains in the royal commentary world trying to find proof of this instance, trying to find these pictures. And for the life of us, we have not been able to find any pictures of this dramatic car chase where people were almost knocking
Mhm.
Meghan off the road and she's pulling up into the police station. We haven't been able to locate that. There is a media interest in Harry and Meghan, but the paparazzi interest in Harry and Meghan is under control. I mean, I could say that confidently.
Yeah.
In no way, shape, or form would I ever, ever, ever compare it to the same attention that Princess Diana received, which was dangerous and out of control.
Yeah,
And
I agree
Catherine
with that,
too. I
especially
mean,
'cause
I don't mean to be, I don't mean to, I don't, Catherine too, is horrible, horrible. People calling her names, just trying to get a reaction out of her. She had a much harder time than Meghan did.
yeah, I'd agree with that, and especially, like, they always talk about, like, especially, like, with the Netflix documentary, they talked about, like, the paparazzi harassment and all that stuff, but they never had any footage of Meghan. It was always Diana, Kate, and, like, everyone it was always everyone else, and there was never any, like, exact footage of her, so I found that really interesting when I was watching it.
Right. Your own production team can't locate the footage.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to see all of that, and, like, I find it really interesting because every day, like, every time I'm opening Twitter, I'm opening Instagram or whatever, I'm seeing new tidbits of, like, discrepancies and everything of what they're saying, like, with Harry's book, like, the biggest one was, like, the Queen Mother's death, like,
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like that's a pretty significant thing to remember, and the
Yeah.
fact that he wasn't saying, like, it wasn't even remotely similar to what the actual truth was, so I thought that was really interesting.
That's a simple Google search that somebody neglected to
Yeah.
do. It's insane.
Yeah, it's the basic fact checking, and I feel like a lot of that wasn't done with this book, like, I think I
Well,
saw
let me just say a lot of that is not done with Harry. Oh, sorry. A lot of that is not done with Harry and Meghan, period, because Tom Bradby did not challenge Harry when he said, I didn't call my family race. I mean, he did to an extent, but he really should have shut it down
Mhm.
and said that I think you're being manipulative because you know that the British media did not create that narrative. Your wife did. But there is not a lot of fact checking that goes on with Harry and Meghan, period. Why didn't Anderson Cooper ask Harry, what's the difference between you airing your dirty laundry and Thomas Markle? I mean, that's a pretty legitimate question. And so I
Yeah.
think that it's not just the book. It's a lack of fact checking when it comes to Harry and Meghan, because I'll tell you why. I feel like they are difficult to work with and you don't want to challenge them because they're problematic and they push back and they're hmm I mean, I think they're really immature and I think that people just want to get the product out there and get it over with. Like you've heard,
Yeah.
after Jubilee, Harry contacted his publisher and said, I want to pull back on the book. I mean, they just wanted to get this thing over with.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like a lot of it gets, like, dragged out and just, like, you're always hearing, like, the book was originally supposed to be, like, like, fall of 2022, and then it was, like, November of 2022, and then I think it was, like, October last year, they said it was gonna be early 2023. So it's
Yeah,
just always the pushback of, like, to add the new information and get more information out there.
right. That's just like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Glad it's out there, but oh my gosh, what a wild piece of literature it is.
Yeah, I think it's finally starting to slowly get behind us, and I think, like, today with, like, with King Charles's and the Prince and Princess of Wales engagements today, I think, like, there's, the video of, someone asking William, like, if he was hurt by the claims from the book. I think after the Oprah interview, I know he answered, like, a question, like, if he thought the royal family were racist or something, and he answered, but I think this time it was good that he didn't answer because it's such a different scenario now, and we know so much more that I think it was really
Well,
good that he didn't answer it.
and I liked that they kept smiles on their face when they did that because that
Yeah.
felt like they were above the fray. But I also think that it's really important that they stay quiet this time because one of Harry's biggest arguments that he said on almost every interview was that the royal family was willing to defend themselves, but not Harry and Meghan. So if they keep
Yeah.
quiet and don't, then they don't contradict what Harry said specifically. I mean, what we should acknowledge is that Harry's lying. There are plenty of examples of the royal family defending Meghan. Specifically, it's Prince William that signed off on Harry's defense of Meghan when they first started dating, when Harry felt like he was sensing some racial undertones in articles. It's William that okayed that release that went out that said, give
Mhm.
Meghan a break, lay off Meghan. So that there are multiple examples of the royal family defending Meghan and Harry. I mean, mostly Harry, if you want to look at all his wild teen years. But
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was a really good example of that dignified silence today as they smiled and continued to walk on, because if they were to fight back, it looks like, oh, so you are willing to only defend yourself, but you wouldn't defend Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, and I think it shows the front of, we're putting this behind us, we're moving on, starting it's a fresh year, fresh reign. It's the beginning of the King Charles era, beginning of William and Catherine as the Prince and Princess of Wales. So I think it just shows where the priorities lie for this time, and I think that's really important, especially with Charles' coronation coming up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are you going for the coronation? Like, are you going to be doing some commentary for it?
I am. I'm going to be with GB News for the coronation, and I'm really excited about that. I'll be there for about a week to build the hype of what's to come. But I do think it's going to be a great, fun day full of beautiful visuals, especially as Americans. We love the pomp and ceremony. And
Mhm.
I'm interested in seeing how he modernizes the ceremony, because that's really
Yeah.
important to him. But I'm also interested in seeing unity, because while Harry and Meghan have aired out the dirty laundry and are very clear in the fact that they feel there is some dysfunction within the family, you are seeing that it has made William and Charles closer. It has made Sophie and Catherine are chatting it
Mhm.
up. I mean, other members of the royal family, the chaos surrounding Harry and Meghan have made them much tighter, and they're leaning on each other, for strength. And I think that that's really been kind of, I mean, it's horrible circumstances, but it's pleasant to see how much Zara and Catherine and Sophie and these
Mhm.
women, they truly love each other and build each other up.
Yeah, and I think it was either today or yesterday there was the YouGov poll published that had Anne as the most popular royal right now, and that really shocked me because she's like yesterday she had like 9 engagements in Cyprus, and you heard nothing about them in like any media, and it's just super cool that like someone so underrated for how much work she does. And Anne is like, I have always found Anne super funny. Like, I think she's amazing, like super cool. So it was really interesting to see someone like her being the number one when it always used to be the queen.
Right, no nonsense. And
Yeah.
people, I saw that I wish I could remember who wrote it. I think Richard Palmer might have tweeted it, but the article that was written talking about how Harry really should have spent more time with the Princess Royal, because she really is the
Hmm.
definition of a fierce spare, somebody that created a role and a path for herself and has been incredibly successful
Hmm.
at it, and truly has changed the world for the better. In all of her
Yeah.
activity, she has left footprints that, other people can follow, and they can change the world in a positive direction as well. I think that was a huge missed opportunity for Harry. He really should have spent more time with the Princess Royal.
Yeah, and I think Anne, I agree, I really agree with you. And I think Anne has always showed such like a dignified front. Like with her mother's death, I think it was amazing that she was just by her mother's side through the whole journey to burial. And I think that was like, I remember seeing some of the videos and some of the pictures of her, like when they were traveling from um Balmoral up to even just Edinburgh, that like 4 hour car ride. Just some of those pictures. It was really like home hitting, I think, to show how important like the role is to her, but also
Yeah.
like supporting her family in the meantime.
Well, yes, and knowing that, according to Harry, she is the one that greeted him when he arrived and took her or took him specifically to the Queen's body. I mean, that's very sweet. Also, I felt like it was inappropriate when Anderson Cooper asked where the Queen was, where her body was, when Harry got there and
Mhm.
whispered in her ear, when Anderson was like, where was she? I was like, this feels gross. Not a question I would have asked, but okay, Anderson Cooper.
Yeah, I think it was really some of the questions in those first 2 interviews I thought were really interesting like that. I
Yeah.
noticed, especially just even between, the Tom Bradby interview and Anderson Cooper's interview, I noticed a lot of questions were the same, and I was talking about it with my mom, how it seemed like the
Well, they were
questions were, like,
approved.
given to the interviewers.
They were approved ahead
Okay,
of time. And it makes you wonder
okay,
if Harry was like, "Oh, well, I'm prepared to answer these questions. Anderson Cooper's going to ask me this.
yeah.
So do you want to just ask me this too?"
Yeah, I was kinda wondering that too, because it was a lot of similar like, the exact order of everything was even the same, it felt like.
And you could tell when Tom went off script just a little bit because Harry was clearly agitated.
Yeah, you could see, like, there was one part I remember he, like, put his hands over his face and, like, looked up at the ceiling and was, like, taking, like, a really deep breath, and you could tell he was, like, super, like, agitated and stressed out, and I just it was funny because it's like there's no wiggle room for what they wanna talk about.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. It's their way or the highway. And I've had people ask me, could things have worked out with Harry and Meghan in the royal family? And I said, I don't think so, because, Harry describes that physical fight between him and William. That to me sounds like William believes what he's being told. People went through the proper channels to report any sort of bullying, any sort of inappropriate behavior. People weren't going straight to William trying to create drama. They went to a manager who went to a senior manager, and it did trickle up to William the correct way. He approached Harry about it. Harry was I'd say stubborn and refusing to listen, and wants to blame these people that make like $20,000 a year. Harry
Yeah.
openly discusses people crying that work for him, crying at their desk in his book. I'm sorry, that's a toxic work environment. That's not a typical work
Yeah.
day for people. And so I don't think that Harry and Meghan could have stayed within the royal family unless they changed the way that they communicated, because I think that those interviews are a great example of stubbornness, and it's their way or the highway. You either follow their direction and their rules, or you lose all access to them and they burn that bridge.
Yeah, and I think you had said, like, something kinda similar with that. You said, on your podcast a couple episodes ago, you had talked about, like, how if they had just stayed at the course during COVID and, like, if they were there those couple extra months, they would have been away from the family, they would have been just at Frogmore, and they would have had a chance to maybe see how things went from there.
Yeah, and everybody was working from home, working from their laptops at that time, um, eh, taking a beat. I think that it would have been really good for them. But Courtney, this is why I think that there was always this plan in the back of their heads. They came to America. I live in Los Angeles. They
Mhm.
immediately had distributed security cameras from apartment buildings and people's ring cameras of them delivering
Yeah.
food to people that had health issues and couldn't leave their homes. Okay, that's not staged at all. That your PR have somehow managed to get apartment security footage to deliver to the local news.
Yeah.
They immediately did that. Meghan is immediately on the bill to speak with Stacey Abrams, Hillary Clinton, and Kamala Harris
Mhm.
on multiple digital events to promote voting. So I think that this was always the plan to leave, because everything they hit the ground running when they got over to the States with some of those things. And I do think that if they would have stayed over there and just, you know, dealt with, they weren't going to have to deal face to face with Catherine and Will for what, a year, 2 years. I mean, COVID was
Yeah.
running rampant within that family. They didn't have to see them or deal with them.
Mhm.
If they would have just taken a beat, I think that everything would have worked out much different. But I don't think they wanted that. I
Yeah.
think that they wanted to be in the States. I think they wanted to be political, and I think they wanted to monetize
Mhm.
their name and their brand.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And like you were saying, how when they went and distributed the food and got the footage to the local news channels and everything, it was really interesting too because that was right after it was a short time after Charlotte's, I think, fifth birthday pictures were released, which is when William and Catherine went out with George and Charlotte to do that in the local Sandringham community because they were staying at Amber Hall all the time. So I remember I think I found that distinctly interesting and kind of questioned it when I saw it.
Yeah, and somebody said to me the other day when I made the comment that all of this media buzz was happening around Catherine's birthday. So what? It's Catherine's birthday. Well, Harry knows, as a 40-year-old man that spent the majority of his life within the institution, that birthdays are a way for the royal family to remind the world that they are united and that they love each other and that they're celebrating each other. It's through photography, it's through social media mentions, and
Mhm.
typically on Catherine's birthday, we would have a list of all the people that wished her a happy birthday and a beautiful new photograph of her or her and her family. And that didn't
Mhm.
happen this time because Harry went ballistic, and he knows that that's the game plan, and he knows that he's interrupting it, and they know, and I think that they do that intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always found, like, when back in 2020 when Megxit was announced and, like, when it was, like, leaked or whatever the truth of it that actually happened, it was the day before her birthday, and this year they centered everything, like, her birthday was, like, the epicenter of everything that happened, and I've always found that really interesting because I've talked about it with on Twitter and, like, with various people and everything, and, I think that they know it gets to not only her, but I think they also know it really gets to William, so I think it's a bigger dig for both of them.
Yeah, and I actually don't think Catherine cares. I think it's the courtiers that created this game plan that they've been following for
Mhm.
years that it probably really irritates. I think as long as Catherine is surrounded by her babies and her handsome husband,
Yeah.
I think that she's totally content. Um, I had that psychic on my podcast recently that said Meghan was out for
Mhm.
blood when it came to Catherine,
Yeah.
and their actions reflect that. It does seem like they're really
Yeah.
trying to hurt Catherine and her brand. And why? Let it go. Because she sent a text message frustrated over the fact that it's 4 days away and nobody's dresses fit. I mean, I would be super stressed too. The Taylor actually came
Yeah.
out and said we worked 4 days around the clock, sun up to sundown, to fix everybody's dresses. Catherine had just had a baby, and she had heard reports that had been abusive to her staff. I don't know how you would communicate with anyone otherwise. Obviously, they're not going to be best
Yeah.
friends. They have completely different backgrounds. Catherine grew up in the same house with her mother and father, grew up crawling into
Mhm.
bed with her brother and sister, loving on them, calling them whenever she needed support. Meghan grew up in a divorced household. She said she'll tell you herself she grew up as a single child despite having step siblings. And, Catherine just values family. Catherine has completely different values and priorities than Meghan does. They're not going to be best friends. Sorry, it's just facts.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always found it and like you were saying, like, with, the text messages and the communicating 4 days before the wedding, I found the whole like, in the book, the whole baby bearing comment, I found all of that. I'm obviously way too young to have kids, but if someone had ever said that to me, I would not ever wanna talk to them again. Like, I just feel like especially because they had known each other for such little time at that point. I think it had been on reports of when they met, like, a year. So I think it was really just an interesting comment that struck me because our society our the way we communicate as Americans with people is so different from over there. So I think that was just a lot of I think that played into the bigger issues of
But
it too.
but it's also the fact that Meghan hadn't had a child yet. So you can't comment on baby brain. You have not been a
Yeah.
mother yet. This is Kate's third go round. We know in the
Mhm.
past that Kate had incredibly difficult pregnancies, could not keep anything down.
Yeah.
She just had her baby. Your body is done after you give birth. You're exhausted, but you're also a human jungle gym, and you've got three small children that all want your
Yeah.
attention. And it was it was such an unfair comment to make because Meghan hadn't been a mother yet. She was not in a position to make a statement like that. She didn't even know if, to me, uh, obviously you shouldn't make a statement like that, period, especially if you're not friends with that person. And know your place. I hate to remind you, Catherine is going to be queen consort one day. You're not. There needs to be another level of respect for her. but you have
Mhm.
never even experienced it before. So what are you talking about? Shut up. Come back after you've given birth and maybe you can accuse me of having baby brain, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think kind of touching on that, you said, like, how Catherine's gonna be the queen consort. I think I honestly think that's such a bother for Meghan. Like, I really think it gets under her skin every time she's reminded of it.
Yeah, and so the argument there is that Meghan wants everybody to be treated the same, that Meghan thinks everybody is equal while treating her staff like absolute garbage, while telling staff members when she first starts dating Harry, I'm probably going to be your boss one day, so you should probably listen to me. You know,
Yeah.
it's again, I think a theme we see with the Sussexes, the hypocrisy, the contradictions. Meghan wants to be treated special because she married well, but she doesn't think that Catherine should be treated any better than she is.
Yeah. I've always found the comments and everything from the two of them just so interesting because I see, like, I look at William and Catherine and I see such, like, a dignified front. Like, there's always, like, there's always how Catherine is always compared to the Queen Mother and the Queen, and just that sense of, like, dignified, trying to get on with it. And then I think there's so much trouble that came when Meghan came into the picture that it threw everything up in the air.
I was on TV yesterday with somebody and I could just tell there are certain commentators that root for Harry and Meghan because it's the only way they can get
Hmm.
on TV.
Yeah.
And I could just
Yeah.
tell that this person, like, no matter what you said, even if it was even if it wasn't even if it wasn't insulting at all, even if it was just factual, this commentator was like big eye roll, big, and then pounce on it. And I just didn't have the stomach for it because I could tell that it wasn't sincere and they were just liking their screen time. And so I really didn't play
Yeah.
along. I was like, I don't have that kind of power, but okay. Um, but I think that why am I going into this story? I just went so deep into insulting this random person and I've lost the point of my story. I, I I don't even know why I was telling you that, except I think that there is no justification for their actions. I feel like anybody that's defending them at this point is just doing it to have a camera in their face because I can't imagine somebody looking at how often they talk completely different than what they're doing. I'm
Yeah.
saying that this is who I am. I'm saying that I'm living a life of service while I've spent the last 2 weeks totally dismantling my family. Um, I don't know. I just think that it's hard to defend them at all at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like like what you said with, like, how they're promoting, like, they're working to promote mental health. And with Harry's position, and I can't remember, CFO or whatever he is with
Yeah,
BetterUp,
yeah,
I
it's
think
chief
it's
impact
all
officer.
yeah. I found it really interesting that you're working to promote mental health, but in a sense tearing down the mental health of other people that you're very close with, or at one time were very, very close with.
Well, Court, also, he's saying that he was never close to William. I mean, that to me, that's a lie. I'm
Yeah.
sorry that to say you were never close to your brother, that is a lie.
Yeah.
That is not true. And why are you saying that now? Why are you saying that now? Is it because you don't like the narrative that you've turned your back on your family and you shouldn't be oversharing because that is sacred and you know that relationship
Yeah.
and your brother? He's now all of a sudden for the first time in his life saying, yeah, I was never really that close to William. That's not true.
Yeah, I really agree with that because I was watching, for the 20th anniversary of Diana's death, you probably know they did the HBO
I
documentary,
love that.
and
Yes.
yeah, it's one of my favorites. I watched it right after the Anderson Cooper interview on Sunday.
Uh-huh.
I sat down and rewatched it just because there was something, I can't remember exactly what part of the interview it was, but something struck me about it, and I needed to go in and, like, clear something up in my mind. And it just I there's a scene in it where they're sitting there looking at photo albums,
Photos. Yeah.
and it's just the way that the way that Harry talks about that time, because it was probably recorded only a few months before he got engaged to Meghan, and I just looking at how he describes that time and seeing how they actually were with like engagements and like the footage from that scene in the documentary, it was just really striking to me of like the indiscrepancies of different times.
Yeah, he looks back on his life when he started dating Megan with really negative glasses on. There were happy
Yeah.
times. There were like there were positive times. But it's just it's like I actually take back what I just said. He looks back on his whole life with such a negative attitude because of 18 months that Meghan didn't work out within the royal family. It's really such a loss for him, because
Yeah.
if he continues to be so negative about the world, then he's never going to be happy.
Yeah, and he always like the big theme with Harry's interviews recently was the past 6 years. And I think when you look at 6 years, they were married in the royal family for only 18 months.
Mhm.
So it's just 18 months, like it doesn't have enough time. So I feel like they needed to just wait it out a little more and see what happens.
18
Like I feel like if they
18
had,
months, and they haven't talked to him for the last 3 years. 18 months, and
yeah.
we see them together at the funeral, and they were there at Jubilee, but there was no communication that
Mhm.
happened behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It's 18 months, and then the last 3 years there's been little to no communication. And if there has been, we know about it thanks to Gail King talking about it, because actually, Harry, you're also leaking too.
Yeah, that's another argument that I found really interesting because there was they talk about Charles and Camilla and William and Catherine's office always leaking things. But I do remember there being back in late 2019, like when they did like the Africa documentary,
Uh-huh.
I remember there being like positive articles about them that were coming out, but also had like shade being thrown at William and Catherine and Charles and Camilla. So I think it's really interesting that they'll blame the others, but won't take accountability for what their offices were doing as well.
Yeah, no, there's no way that that was a one-way street. And actually, Dan Wooten's come out and been very clear and
Mhm.
surprisingly, what word am I looking for? Candid about how Harry and
Yeah,
Meghan's offices approached him with some things that
yeah,
probably shouldn't, that probably the royal family wouldn't have wanted out there.
yeah. And I've seen a couple other reporters doing it. Like I think I saw something from like Chris Ship had said something similar, and then there was someone else that had said something. But there's so many like that I had seen, and it was really interesting to see them all like coming out and like saying the truth because I think it was really revealing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never Harry and Meghan's fault. And as much as they use the word accountability through the ITV interview, it's interesting how they don't ever take it.
Yeah. Um. Do you think they're gonna be at the coronation?
I don't know. And I was originally saying that I thought that I have heard that they were generally invited. I thought
Mhm.
that that was good to generally invite them, because if they weren't invited, they get to play the victims again. But
Yeah.
now that I've seen the book, I really think that they're on such a destructive path. We're also hearing Meghan is working on a book as well. We're hearing the Princess Royal and
Yeah.
Prince Edward really don't want them there because they don't want their words ending up in the paperback edition of Harry's book. So I would tell you
Yeah.
now, I have since changed my mind, and I hope that they don't show up, and I kind of hope they're not invited. But I understand if the palace
Yeah.
does invite them. If they don't, they look like the villains that Harry and Meghan are working
Yeah.
for time to paint them as.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I agree with all that. I saw over the weekend, I think Maria Mika had done her a big article on the coronation
Uh-huh.
and talked about how only William was going to be kneeling for Charles this
Yes.
time around, and I thought I think that really was showing and revealing to where Charles is thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't that really the best way it could be? I think it's
Yeah.
just so much more intimate that way. And I think we do
Mhm.
need to remind the world that, look, I know Charles, his numbers are good right now, but he's never been the first choice. Okay. I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah.
But we accept and love him because he is the rightful heir. He was
Mhm.
the rightful heir. He is the rightful sovereign, and he was the queen's choice because she believed in him. She had faith in him to reign as a wonderful king. But
Yeah.
the reality is everybody truly does love Prince William. So if
Yeah.
we can continue to have those moments where you see the king and his son and you see that unity and you see the future which people are excited about, I do think that will strengthen the royal family's brand.
Yeah, and I think, well, like you talked about with the connection between King Charles and Prince William, I think back in, I believe it was 2020 for Father's Day, they Kensington Palace posted the picture of William and Charles with this big bear hug from
Yeah.
William, and
Yeah,
Charles's
yeah,
head
yeah.
is leaning on his shoulder.
Love that.
I
Love
think
that photo.
that picture, yeah, I think that picture is it's from I believe it was from 2019, but I think it's just a really showing image of even before all the drama with Harry and Meghan went down, it shows that they were always unified, and I think that they always have William and Harry have minimally talked about like issues they had with their father when they were younger, but I think it really shows that they became way more accepting, and especially in on William's part, he just opened up and realized everyone makes mistakes, but it's better to just move forward with it.
Well, and I think that Charles's heart softened a lot with age. I think that
Yeah.
actually having Camilla by his side, being in a position to
Mhm.
marry Camilla and to be comfortable with his soulmate, I think it really
Yeah.
softened his heart. And I think that he's also opened up a lot and been more understanding and thoughtful with the boys since then. I know that Harry says that she's the Antichrist, but I honestly think that a lot of the reason
Yeah.
why he has stayed out of trouble over the years is because he's so confident and comfortable in having her by his side.
Yeah, I think because especially once it's crazy to think they got married when the year I was born. So yeah, they're a little fun fact I love telling people is their engagement was announced to the date on February 10th, 2005, and February 10th, 2005 is the day that I was born.
That's amazing. What a fun story
Yeah,
to
it's just a
have.
fun yeah, it's a super fun little piece of information that I love just being able to like share with everyone. But I think since then you've really seen a show in how Charles has like really just opened up and become way more accepting of everything. And I think the causes he started supporting are really important. And you've seen a lot of stuff with that and opening up to family life more. And I think when especially when George is born, like he has the garden at the like Prince George's garden at Highgrove. I think that's like a really cute thing that he did, and I think that opened his eyes to like family life a lot more.
Oh yeah, I think I don't know if he ever even contemplated becoming a grandfather, but it certainly is a joy to see him engaging with his grandchildren. One of my Charles highlights of all time ever is actually the sight of Louis sitting in his lap dancing during Jubilee. So
Yeah,
the grandchildren I think have played a major role in improving his image. And while I don't think that that was ever a purposely done, like, well, we got to have some grandbabies so Charles looks good, it certainly has helped. It certainly has benefited um, him in the long run because people do enjoy seeing how sensitive and sweet he can be.
yeah, and I think kind of touching on that within Spare, Harry talks about how like his father wasn't very affectionate, and I think that might have been the case at that time. But when he describes there's certain moments within the book that he describes,
Dear boy, that's so
I think
affectionate.
yeah, and there's certain times like he even talks about him like hugging him and always wanting to like check in on him. And there's one in like within the first like quarter of the book he talks about how he was really afraid of the dark, so Charles would always sit with him while he was falling asleep. And then he'd wake up and the light in the hallway would be on and the door would be cracked open just a little bit so you could have the light in.
Yeah.
If Charles wasn't affectionate, I feel like it wouldn't have been like that.
Well, also a lot. I don't know what his time frame is on that, but once Princess Diana died, Charles gave Harry anything and everything he ever wanted because he felt such
Mhm.
guilt over the death of his mother. You want to hang out with the
Yeah.
Spice Girls? Okay. I mean, it was just taking him all over the world with him. Harry, for a while there, became his partner in crime, his little PIC, like his partner in
Yeah.
crime. And so I don't know what the timeline there is for being affectionate, or and really how can you be, who is as compassionate and affectionate as Princess Diana? I mean, if you are judging anybody against Princess Diana, you might think that they're not affectionate because she was so loving and
Yeah.
affectionate, just this total snuggler, a total kisser, a total hugger.
Mhm.
But yeah, he was I do think that Harry has a negative view on most of his life because of the last few years of his
Yeah.
life, which is not the reality. He's just, you know, got a bad attitude.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes with, like I think a lot of it comes with, like, clouded judgment of being still, like, grieving with his mother's death, and I think as he's talked about in all the interviews recently in the book, a lot of it was trying to cure the grief through the drugs and the alcohol and the partying, and I think that does play a negative effect over some of it, but he makes it seem like it's all of it, and I feel like it can't take accountability for, like, everything that he's describing.
Yeah, and we are all sympathetic towards Harry because we all grew up with him.
Mhm.
We our hearts broke while we watched him walk behind the coffin, but I do think that at some point you have to turn the hurt into healing, and you have to use it to become a better person. And that was the tease on the book, The Man I Am Today, or The Man That I Became. But I don't
Yeah.
see the life of service. I don't see the life of service yet. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, I was slowly up until he met Megan. It was starting I think that was the formation of it, but then I think once that breakdown happened in 2018, 2019, whenever it actually happened, I think that was kind of a downplay in it, and when you started like, they took the six-week holiday, I think, in Canada, I think that just really showed, like, it's like all the other William and Catherine are still working. They're working right up until like the week before Christmas, whereas you're taking a 6-week holiday to avoid the press when at that time there wasn't super bad press about them.
Well, that's really when you started to see the strategy, the pulling away from the family and them strategizing
Mhm.
that exit. And it was also, I'll never not mention this, the time he took that embarrassing phone call from Greta Thunberg, which was actually YouTube prankers.
Yeah.
Um, but I really I hate to let you go, but I just GB News is asking me to talk about this Lisa Marie. She suffered a cardiac arrest. They're asking me if I can go on to talk about Lisa Marie having a heart attack. I didn't know that. That apparently is breaking. Is there anything else you need or want from me before I let you go?
I think that's it.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to send you this video. I'm going to send it to you from my Gmail because I have this file transfer thing on Gmail. So I'll send you
Okay.
this video in just a second from my Gmail account, and let me know if you need anything else or if you have any other questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye.